Welcome to Brown Girls Don't. It's crazy. People are seeing my face for the first time, feeling a little bit seen. But hey, that's the way it is. Not you though. You're always on bloody camera.
Always out and about, just being iconic. Do you know what I mean?
But yeah, I mean, I feel like you don't actually need to be introed. I'm probably going to hype this up on Instagram so much before we release.
I mean, everybody knows me, and if you don't, you're gonna know me. So
you're going to know her at the end of this. But hey, do you want to intro yourself?
So my name is Sheerah Ravindren. I am a god, an icon, a creative, a model. I'm really whatever I want to be. I'm doing what I can.
There we go.
You know what I mean?
And I am Mansi. Obviously, I run Brown Girls Don't. I am a South Asian, a woman of colour. And I think, so the reason why I started this podcast was so that we could have honest conversations in a safe space about what it means to be South Asian and what it means to be a woman of colour. And I feel like you have a lot to say about it. You know, when we were talking about like briefing, when we were talking about what we could make this episode about, what really stood out was the big question: what is diversity to you?
I mean, I think diversity really right now is just a word, but I don't know. I think for me, the way it's like a buzzword right now. I think it's everyone's favorite word being used, but I think it's meant to be something that's meant to include people that haven't been included and being visible.
Yeah.
But I think right now with diversity, there's a lot of diversity quotas, people wanting to, you know,
a lot of like tokenism as well. Yeah.
But also I think picking, you know, Black, brown, queer folks and other marginalized folks that are still very palatable and in proximity to whiteness.
So when it comes to diversity right now, right, we're seeing so much people would say South Asian representation. And the concepts that stand out to me most is, obviously I'm a freelancer and usually I work with South Asian creatives. We're seeing this renaissance of like South Asian creators coming out into the open and being celebrated. But then there are other points that aren't necessarily touched upon. And that's, while there's representation, there's a lack of representation. Do you want to maybe talk a little bit about that and explain that situation?
Yeah, so I think with even the term South Asian, it's an umbrella term. And I think that typically when people have understood that term South Asian, it has like majority being people from like who are Punjabi and North Indian people, right?
Yeah.
So I've made, especially as a Tamil person, as a non-binary person, like I want to be really visible about my Tamil, queer, non-binary, like femme identity, because those aren't the kind of things that are represented under that label of South Asian.
Yeah.
And I would also say like I'm Tamil before I'm South Asian, because I think a lot of this like South Asian representation right now, I think that it's benefiting, like I said, the dominant communities than it is benefiting like people from my community. And seeing a lot when I, you know, right now, as you said, there might be like a South Asian renaissance to some, but there is an explosion of Tamil artists right now. There is a Tamil renaissance happening right now. We've got amazing people like Ashley Simone, Raman Krishnan.
Yes.
Sorry, something that's really wrong. But you know, me as well.
You are. You're being represented now, iconic. But you're not. I would say you're not necessarily being represented as a whole.
I think that right now, like, you know, there is this Tamil, you know, renaissance happening with these amazing artists being visible and seen. And the greatest thing is that all of these Tamil people are like so visible about their Tamil identities. So it's also very important for me to like point out when like I see North Indians and Punjabis wanting to then categorize that as Tamil. I mean, as South Asian representation and not Tamil representation, how it actually erases us.
So would you say that you're not South Asian, or, you know, would you say that they're mutually exclusive?
I think whenever I use the term South Asian, it's like to discuss issues that affect people from the region of South Asia, right?
Okay.
But to say that I'm not saying it to you, if I ever use it, it's not saying that we're the same people. That's what I'm trying to say. I think this issue, if I'm discussing an issue that affects all of us, then that's how I'm using it. But I'm a Tamil person. Like, that's how I identify.
It's an interesting journey as well, because I'm coming to you as with an identity. I'm a Gujarati woman.
Yeah.
I would say that Gujarati people, you've got Punjabis who are obviously at the forefront of this renaissance, as I call it, but you've also got Gujarati people there because of, as you said, their proximity to whiteness.
Yeah.
When I first spoke to you, it was to do with a podcast about, the freedom of speech and how there might be a lack of in our communities. And I actually remember, and it's actually like embarrassing now when I think about it, but obviously everything is sort of like a learning curve,
completely.
But I remember saying to you, "Lok kya kahenge,"
Yeah.
and you were like, I don't know what that means. I don't speak, I don't know Hindi.
Yeah.
And I was like, number one, I was like, oh shit, why am I tarring her with the same brush as everyone else?
Yeah.
But then also I was like, she doesn't know Hindi. And then I thought about it and I was like everyone would know Hindi. When I grew up, I was subject to an environment where up until the age of 9, I thought Gujarati was the language that South Asian people spoke.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Yeah.
I didn't even think about South Asian people when I was younger, because that's sort of the environment that you're brought up in.
Yeah.
And then you've got Bollywood, right? And Bollywood, mostly everyone speaks Hindi.
Yeah.
And when there are people who speak in Tamil or speak in a South Indian language, they're sort of there for comedic value. So that's when I started thinking about, oh shit, there is more to the South Asian culture than
South Asia is so huge.
Right.
There's so many different ancestries, languages, cultures, histories that exist. So, having people use two dominant groups and spreading that across the rest of us, it's upsetting. It completely erases us. It makes us invisible. And, and when I say the way that people recognize South Asia as those two communities and cultures and that kind of stuff, having also white people come up to me and ask me oh yeah, do you listen to Bhangra or Bollywood? And I'm just like, yeah, I'm Tamil, I wouldn't know. Do you know what I mean? I don't watch Bollywood films, I don't listen to Bhangra music, I don't speak Hindi or Punjabi, and then that has also then happened with Punjabi people doing the same to me as well, expecting me to be able to speak in Punjabi, or North Indians expecting me to speak in Hindi, and then also being completely oblivious of Tamil people and culture and the kind of our own individual issues. Yet I'm so aware of.
I mean, so you're talking about this there's otherness, right, that you have to deal with from the white community, from the Caucasian community, but then there's an otherness to an otherness. There's so many layers of oppression. When did you become aware of this sort of second, third degree of otherness? When did you start speaking up about it as well?
I mean, I can't give a specific day.
No specific day.
But I think I was being aware of it. That was during my time in school. I might not have had the vocabulary to articulate myself and talk about what it is I'm feeling. So I experienced so much bullying and harassment for from especially Punjabi kids in school. So me also, it's that feeling of you're not white enough for the white kids.
Yeah.
But
you're not.
Yeah, I'm not Punjabi or North Indian.
Or North Indian passing. Right.
For these kids. So they made it clear that we are not the same. So that followed me, and it's this even now I carry a lot of the trauma that from a lot of the abuse that I had from those communities till this day. I guess speaking up about it and speaking about that news, I always had these conversations with my siblings, and just having these conversations then through social media, finding other people having these conversations.
Your granddad was an activist, right?
Yeah,
so it runs deep.
I mean, well, my grandfather, he was a Tamil civil rights activist. So if anyone doesn't know, I'm Elam Tamil, and obviously the island of the state of Sri Lanka committed genocide against Tamil people. So my grandfather, who was an activist who spoke up about what was happening, was murdered by the state. So I guess me being vocal about and being very powerful about my Tamil identity, it does run through me, and knowing that inspires me. And so, having the platform, whilst I can never compare the work that he did with mine, I'm trying to do what I can, and I'd like to think that I'll make him proud, right? Doing it in my own
of course.
way. And
I've seen it. I mean, obviously you were at there was a South Asian underground music festival a few weeks ago, which I couldn't go to because I was oh my god, the tea's like, guys, I love that you're getting married, but stop having hen dos that coincide with my South Asian identity celebration. But you were there, and obviously I was like, how fitting that she's come from a line of activists and civil rights movement sort of people who uphold that. And you were there with your
but
you were there with your like big fat placard. What was on it again?
So it says, I'm Tamil, not Desi.
Yes.
And underneath I'm Tamil, it was I'm Tamil, but in
what was the reception to that, man? What was the reception?
Interesting. So if we're talking about like on the day, the reception, as I had my placard about to go on stage for Hungama. So also I really also want to like give credit to Ryan. So like Ryan, who is a ally, he is, you know, my best friend. He's an amazing person. He's also the creator of Hungama, which happens to Ryan. Which happens to be a very Desi and Bollywood night. So, you know, him using his platform to platform a Tamil person who's very proud about their identity, it's like a huge thing. And he was the one, I had said that, you know, if I'm going to be on stage and if I'm going to be in a predominantly like Punjabi North Indian environment,
of course,
I want to make a statement. He was like, go for it. He was like encouraging me. He was like, make that sign.
I love
Let's do it on the stage. You know, make that moment. Had the sign, and as I was holding the sign, I'm the kind of person, I'm like, I don't care about the negative eyes on me. I'm like, because the point's being made, but also they're doing the very thing this is the reason why I need to do it if they're giving me negative eyes. But as I'm holding the sign, I had people that were walking by that were like giving me like dirty looks, and I was just like, and my friend and my sibling that was there was like noticed it as well, and I was like, yeah, did you notice that? I was like, yeah, I saw that as well. So people being looking at me like, what the fuck? And then the handful of Tamil kids that were there, when they saw it, they were just like, oh, this my is
great.
God,
this is great.
And then obviously a picture was taken, and that turned into a moment, and it was shared on Noisy. I was like, best dressed, I'm making a point. And then that picture was just like reshared like crazy. Loads of Tamil kids were like, you know, really, really happy about it. And like, you know, Tamil kids that didn't attend for, you know, because obviously they don't feel like the event is
representational of them.
Yeah, exactly. And they were just so happy. I guess for me to take up space in that environment was making a bigger statement of like, yeah, we need to actually go into these spaces and take up as much space as it's not just white spaces that I need to take up. I need to take up space in these spaces more than ever.
I would assume, and I definitely agree with you, that, you know, the overbearing concept here, the umbrella idea here, is that there is so much that's been done, right? Look, the South Asian Renaissance is happening, as I said. In the art scene, there are so many people who are exhibiting, who share similar backgrounds to us. But that's not it.
But it's who's not benefiting from it? That's my thing. And I always say, I haven't got an issue with, like, I think that it's actually I think it's more important that we actually highlight our individual communities. And we talk about our differences rather than our similarities. Because when that even that term South Asian, when we start to try and familiarize or like make a similarity amongst us, it's always going to be with with the dominant community. How are we similar with the dominant community? It's not how they're similar with us.
And why would you say
it's how we're similar with them? So it's like when white people want to find something in common with other people, they want to find something that is in common with their white, right? So I'm always like, actually I rate, you know, South Asian platforms that want to highlight where these people are from. I don't care if you're, you know, North Indian or Punjabi or these communities. I care that we highlight that you're from these communities and point out, you know, because like I said, seeing a you know, light-skinned North Indian or Punjabi on TV or doing their thing isn't representation for me
exactly.
You know, as a Tamil person. So to say and expect that you know, aren't you happy because I saw some very light-skinned white passing North Indian or Punjabi on TV, that's meant to be representation for me. I don't see that. And then considering also the issues that then exist with those communities being very like racist towards Tamil people, it is important that we highlight it is Tamil representation when it's Tamil representation.
It's lazy to group us all together.
Yeah.
And also it's lazy and almost, I would say, offensive to like gatekeep. Because what's happened is, and this is how people like, I hate to get political, but I'm going to do it. This is how people like Priti Patel win. Because what she does is she's got a seat at the table. Okay, she's got a voice.
Yeah.
And because she doesn't understand oppression from somebody else's shoes, she's like, it's fine. You know, we're moving forward. We're moving ahead.
But also, she's not even bringing up the fact that she's also like, she has like every level of privilege as well. You might be a person of color, but you're also light skinned, upper caste, you know, North Indian, and you're speaking from that perspective. So even someone like her being used as a face of South Asians is not even representative of people that even might be from her community.
Exactly. It's like she's like people like her and people who may have more privileges than maybe you or maybe me. It's like they've got a seat at the table, and now they're like, do you know what? No, let's stop everyone else from coming in. We're not gonna, you know, open the table up for other people because this is it. We're done. I am a South Asian and I'm at the table. Therefore, what else needs to be done? And it's about recognizing that actually, yeah, we've come so far, but there is so much more ahead of us to go.
I mean, I don't think someone like Priti Patel is just a product of white supremacy.
Yeah.
She's just used as a face. Someone like her, you can't even say like, we have come so far with that. You look at that and it's like, wow, you've seen actually how white supremacy has been able to try and disguise itself and delude people into thinking that racism doesn't exist. It's like, no, in order for racism to be upheld and white supremacy to be upheld, you also need the people that are being oppressed by it to uphold it. So I think, yeah, even the people that are usually upholding it are also people that benefit from white supremacy or being in proximity to white.
So then drawing upon, the occasion where you're out with your placard doing the activism, I feel like people might have been annoyed because it was like, God, she's at a South Asian Underground Music Festival. You know, what more does she want? Is she not happy?
Yeah, I think it's like, oh, why can't they just be happy? You know, I think for me, I always say this: if you're upset, clearly, you know, the shoe fits.
Yeah.
I'm saying something because it's a simple thing, right? I mean, for me, it's not uncomfortable addressing any privileges or proximity to whiteness that I have. So even saying that, it's like, well, it's uncomfortable addressing privilege. But I'm like, is it really? I don't, because I can address any privileges or proximity to whiteness that I have without being fragile, because it doesn't take away from what I've faced in my life. But choosing not to address any proximity to whiteness is choosing to then also erase so many other further marginalized people's experience. So going back to like, I guess, any like negative reception, I think it's them wanting to refuse that they are not just oppressed, but they also play the part of the oppressor.
Mm-hmm. And what would you say if somebody, you know, heard this conversation and was like, well, do you know what? I've made my mind up. She hates North Indians, or she doesn't think that North Indians are oppressed. I mean, clearly, you know, you don't agree, but how would you phrase it?
It's really simple, and I say this, but it can be used for any conversation that we're having. But, you know, addressing privilege doesn't take away from your oppression, but choosing to just see yourself as some two-dimensional person and your experience as two-dimensional, like I said, it's going to cause so much harm to other people that face oppression from your community. It's like, well, not my quote, so, you know, just making sure that everyone knows it's not my quote, but there's a saying like, everybody wants accountability, but nobody wants to be held accountable. It's my favorite thing to say. It's true. It's like, how can you want accountability from your oppressor when then you are not allowing the same accountability that you want from your oppressor to be given to the communities that you oppress? It's
about not thinking, as you said, two-dimensionally, but sort of having everyone in mind. Like, if you're at the table, and that's fantastic, but you've got to uphold others.
Yeah.
I did a shoot, and you know what? It was amazing. When it came to casting, when it came to picking out guests, I was adamant to have a non-straight Muslim, and then also on top of that have somebody who was Tamil in the shoot. Not just people who are Gujarati and not just people who are Punjabi. And I was genuinely stressing about not having that representation. I remember somebody asking me, like, it's fine, you know, we'll get anyone. I was like, but it's not about, are we getting people who are famous is enough? It's not about getting people who look pretty. It's not about getting people who are well spoken. It's about having people who represent all of us as a South Asian community. And I feel like it's difficult, right? But if you're not moving the needle by making those difficult decisions and hustling to make sure that everyone's represented, then what are you doing for your community? You can rise really fast, but you can fall really fast as well. And
but
people
then
will
I
be
always
watching
say
for you.
it's not South Asian representations if it's just North Indians and Punjabis.
Yeah.
That's not South Asian representation. Because then it's like I said, there's so many people that are within that region of South Asia. I think that those two communities are going to be representative of everyone, not at all.
You talk about like proximity to whiteness and proximity to blackness. I think sometimes people who may look at representation and may look at racism, as ironically and as poetic as it sounds, they'll just look at it in black and white.
Yeah.
They'll be like, you're white passing, you have privilege, or you look dark skinned, you don't have privilege. But actually, there are different how would you explain that proximity?
Really, really good. So, like, when I was talking about my own proximity to whiteness, it's also each situation is completely different. Okay. So you might have one experience that you're oppressed in that situation, but in the other situation, you might be privileged. So, so me being a dark-skinned Tamil person, me in a room full of predominantly North Indian Punjabis who also are like light skin, right?
Yeah.
In that situation, yes, I will be the person in that room that is oppressed or, you know, less visible or treated in a certain way in that setting. But then whilst I'm a dark-skinned Tamil person, I can then be in a room full of, let's say, you know, black people, same complexion as me or darker, with more Afrocentric features and hair textures. And I know that I've been in those spaces where people have put me on a pedestal because I might be dark skinned, but it's like, well, you're a non-black person of color.
Okay.
And then, you know, facial features, hair textures, and that being highlighted or seen as like, oh, this is really palatable, right? So again, I'm not uncomfortable addressing that privilege and proximity to whiteness, but me choosing to just be like, well, I'm a dark-skinned Tamil person, therefore I'm just oppressed. I'm like, no, because I'm still a non-black person of color, and I know that also within the Tamil community, there's anti-blackness that exists.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And also the oppression I face from North Indian Punjabi communities is also coming from that I have a proximity to blackness in that situation.
Okay.
So it's so, you know, nuanced.
It changes all the time.
Your situation is different in every space.
Right.
But I think this whole conversation isn't just about anti-Tamilism. It's also recognizing every single person watching should actually look at their own identities and see how their existence and the experience from their existence plays out in a different situation. I really don't think it's a hard thing to, you know.
No, completely.
Yeah.
I mean, like with me, I'll walk into a room or I'll record a voice note and I'll sound inherently British.
Yeah, so that's another thing, proximity to whiteness, even the fact that we speak in a British accent.
Yes.
Or you speak, you know, if you sound...
And because of internalized colonialism, you'll feel really proud about it. You know, I talk about my accent all the time and I'm from Leicester. Leicester represent, Coventry represent,
Coventry.
But I don't necessarily have the accent. And when I grew up, it was like something to be celebrated. Oh, she has like a semi-posh accent, or she has one that sort of mimics like, or it's closer to royalty than a Leicester accent is.
Like proximity to whiteness isn't just about aesthetic as well.
Yes.
It's also so many other things like education, class,
clothes, the way that you dress, the way that you come across.
So even in the situation where being able to also have a platform to also talk about anti-Tamilism, like I'm not the first person talking about these topics, but also I know that I have a certain platform, and then I look a certain way that is, you know, commodified and seen as palatable. So it's important for me to be able to also then use my platform to then highlight other Tamil people from other different backgrounds and different experiences to also be able to share their experience on these type of topics as well. And
and like ironically, you having a voice and talking about the lack of representation.
I'm not here to gatekeep.
No,
that's
exactly.
What I'm saying. I'm here to kick the door down.
Yeah.
I don't care. I don't want to see it at the table. I will say I'm gonna make my own fucking table, and if I'm on that table, I'm gonna start unscrewing the screws and dismantling that table.
Yes, completely. So, and it's interesting how like you're coming on here and you're talking about how you may be oppressed in certain situations, but you're actually using the voice that you have and the privilege that you have to discuss it.
Yeah.
And it's important to allow people
because look, at the end of the day, the popular North Indian and Punjabi influencers, kids or whatever, they're not going to do it for me.
No.
So I need to do it for my people.
Yeah.
So I need to do it for us.
So when it comes to, I guess, like laziness with representation, let's talk about the series on everyone's lips and minds, Bridgerton.
Yes.
We had like such a long conversation about Bridgerton as well when we were briefing. I'm like, is there anything left to discuss? But, just for the sake of the fact that we're here, when it came to Bridgerton, I don't know about you. Actually, no, I'm pretty sure that you agree with me.
Oh, wait, before we even go into it, I actually just want to say, like, this is in no way critique of that.
Absolutely not.
I was so gagged finding out that it was 2 Tamil actresses that were getting 2 main roles. So I was so happy as a Tamil person to see these beautiful actresses,
completely,
and talented people be able to be visible.
I was overjoyed. I was like, oh my god, it's not Keira Knightley, who's somebody who looks like me. This is crazy. And she's not playing a servant. She's playing this amazing woman who like rides horses and like
she
has
gets
these
to play
fantastic
a main character, and we get her to see someone that is dark skinned, Tamil, be beautiful, be iconic, be sexy.
Yes. But then the point of this conversation and the point of this podcast episode in general is that you can critique what you love.
But then, that's what I mean. Right? So the critique actually comes, and this is not, again, I'm not the first person having this conversation. This was being had through social media. A lot of Tamils were trying to actually bring nuance into a lot of the like there was loads of articles being written by loads of Punjabi and Indian people.
What was the comparison between like the articles that they wrote?
The difference is, I think for me, it wasn't just articles, just general like critique of it. Just remember, like, critique doesn't mean that you don't like something, but it's also trying to make something better and point out like where they fell short. It's like, okay, great, you've got dark-skinned Tamil people who are being casted to play main characters, but then their names are Sharma, they're playing, so they're Tamil people. So it's like, in order for Tamil people to even be visible, they have to erase their Tamilness.
Right.
They had to play upper caste North Indians. Upper caste North Indians don't look like us, right? So even having those characters have to play then upper caste North Indians, and then they were doing things that were not part of Tamil culture, like the turmeric.
Yeah.
That was like really. I was just like,
so I didn't know this.
Yes, I was watching that and I was like, that's not a Tamil thing. I mean, like, that's not part of like the culture, right? Yeah, and then also the fact that like, these little things that I was knowing. I think the only thing that they mentioned that was Tamil was the Amma and Appa calling mum and dad, but that 2 words like Amma and Appa doesn't then make it like, oh, but it's okay because they included Amma.
It was hard to place her. It was hard to place her. I was like, is she are they? And obviously, no offense, because they did a great job even getting them on. But like the idea is we've come so far, but there's so much further to go. I was like, is she an amalgamation of like all South Asian identities, in which case South Asian people aren't a monolith? Or are they saying that she's South Indian and they've got it all wrong?
I mean, they were playing upper caste North Indian characters. So like, I think a lot of the Tamil people that I saw talking about that, they were like, again, happy to see the visibility of beautiful dark-skinned Tamil people, but then it's a shame that so much of our culture and like their identity as Tamil people was erased.
Yeah.
And then what was so crazy is seeing these like really cringy Brown Joy articles written by like North Indians and Punjabis, and then like one article literally that interviewed, I think, predominantly North Indian and Punjabi women.
Right.
And I was like, you think them being like, oh, visibility, I feel seen. And I was like, I remember one of the critiques that I saw through social media by one of like a really, really like amazing Tamil educator that I follow. he basically like was saying how it's so funny how they're saying like, I feel seen. It's like when in school they made Tamil a slur. To look Tamil was seen, have our Dravidian skin and our features was seen as something that we should be ashamed of. So then having the gaslighting really,
Yes.
to have the same communities of people tell us, I feel seen through dark skin Tamil representation, whilst the experience for Tamil kids was that these communities said to us that the way that we looked was horrendous and we were ugly.
Yeah.
That was mind-boggling.
So it's like when it's your struggle, it ain't our struggle. But when you're coming up, it's our
they
success.
are happy to even use the same communities that they even oppress as representation to further their community.
Right, I see what you're saying.
That's why I don't like it. I was like, no, I'm not going to allow anyone to call this South Asian representation. This is Tamil representation. That is Tamil beauty that we're seeing. Yeah. That is Dravidian beauty that we're seeing. So, like I said, I feel seen by this. So I think, a lot of these articles that were written by North Indians and Punjabis were completely erasing the Tamilness.
Yeah, completely.
Here's the thing. I don't care who's writing about the article, but please point out that these are Tamil actresses. And not only that, if you're going to also point out that they're Tamil and like that kind of stuff, maybe also point out the fact that like the anti-Tamilness that has existed within your communities when you're addressing it. Because to first tell us that we're not part of, we are not the same, to make it clear growing up that we are not the same. And then suddenly one of us pops off and whatever, to then all of a sudden claim us. Yeah. That's just disrespectful.
Yeah. And then coming from somebody who, obviously I'm a different identity to you, but coming from somebody who has, I guess, always believed in upholding people who may not necessarily be, upheld in general, because it's not easy. And like coming from somebody who likes being difficult, there have been so many times where like I saw Bridgerton, for example, and obviously as first reaction, I was like, joy, love it. People who are South Indian are finally getting a space. They're occupying a space where we don't have to big up their culture, or we don't have to see them in places that may have like classist connotations. They're the front runners. Yeah. At the same time, though, there was this niggling in I had this like feeling in my head. I had this like uncomfortableness. And there have been so many times where, for example, like on my socials, I remember this one time where I was like deconstructing Gandhi as an identity and saying, look, he was Gujarati. Yeah, great. Like he did so much for this, father of India, as they say, but he was racist AF, okay?
Well, I'm going to say, why do you think the British loved that man so much?
And like Winston Churchill, he was racist AF, but he did things for this country. You know what I mean? God, there were so many other people. For example, with me, I'm Gujarati, right? Modi is the PM of India, and people, I remember when he was elected, people were like, this is great for Gujaratis, this and that. I was like, I remember sat there thinking...
Also, the central government is so different to like, because, like...
Oh, completely. But then I remember there was so much on my WhatsApp, everyone was popping off being like, joy for Gujaratis, like I was like... But what does this mean for Muslims? What does this mean for South Indians?
But also, when it's someone that is upholding like a nationalistic view, that's not a good thing.
That's
for the community.
It, exactly.
That's the issue that I have, I think, with, in any community, nationalism is really the wrong way to go.
Aside from all of the politics and stuff like that, in general, whenever I used to sort of be a whistleblower, one of the biggest issues that people had with it, especially people who shared my identity, was... and they would say in Gujarati, "Taru su jai che." So that means, what of yours? Like, why are you whistleblowing when it isn't an issue for you? Mm-hmm. And it's like, but it doesn't matter if it isn't an issue for me, because at some point, and maybe this sounds selfish, maybe this doesn't, but at some point, we will be the problem. Mm-hmm. The narrative will shift. We will be the problem. And I would quite like people to be sticking up for me when I'm the problem. So why shouldn't I be sticking up for others?
Also, it's like, I think that I always say this, but it's like there's a lot of humans, but not enough humanity in the world. People think it shouldn't even be sticking up for someone or standing up for something shouldn't be something out of self-interest. It should just be you're doing it because it's the right thing to do.
Shouldn't be so hard, man.
Yeah, it's the human thing to do, right?
But like, what would... We've spoken about, all of these events and things like that that you've gone to. but there are some positive things happening. Would you say? Would you not?
I think that in terms of like what I've seen in my platform with what I'm doing myself, but then
Yeah.
also the people that I'm involved with, like I said, like, you know, Ryan Lanchi, my bestie, creative Hungama, being able to like, you know, even like talking to him about these conversations and how like we can, you know, progress Hungama to become even more inclusive and intersectional of like more like other brown communities that exist. And like, you know, it's such a big moment on like, you know, him using his platform to like platform someone from my community and like listening to what I have to say, making me visible. So, you know, there are definitely people and communities that exist that really want to like move it in the right direction. I think again, if and also I'm not here to like target specific events or whatever when I'm talking about, because I think I want my comments to be a thing that I feel about a lot of other South Asian things.
You're just using those things as examples.
Because it's a general issue that I've had. Like I said, I think that if all of these events could actually start really including people outside of the dominant groups and, you know, including also like queer voices as well, making these spaces like, what are we doing to make this space not included for these people? Like really thinking like, why is it that these communities don't feel like they can come in and feel safe in that, like actually making space and platforming us and being like, and having the uncomfortable conversations.
Yes.
I'm not here to just make, you know,
it comes from a place of ignorance, but that comes from fear.
But I think that even whilst there's this explosion of different brown people doing their thing, like, you know, me being Tamil doesn't mean that I'm not going to critique my own community. I've been critiquing my own community with its own issues for ages as well, because I want it to move to a better place that is inclusive and, you know, welcoming. And I think that's the thing. I think these spaces need to start having these uncomfortable conversations, no matter how, you know, the reaction, and actually having the people that have the power start those conversations, because if they're the ones that are the influence and they're the ones that can really make change, then they should be doing that. It shouldn't be just me, you know, being there talking about it. Like, it shouldn't come from the people that are being oppressed. It should also be the ones benefiting from it and starting
this. It's supposed to be a collaborative conversation rather than you sort of whistleblowing all the time. I'm sure it gets tiring.
Because it's
like,
just like constantly I'm not here. Like, here's the thing. I mean, you know, my platform, it is a space that is full of so much like positivity and change, but I'm not into that whole what's that toxic positivity thing, where I think that in order for something to be truly positive, we have needed to go through uncomfortable situations and acknowledge it so that space can be positive. We can't just pretend it's positive whilst there's these underlying issues.
Exactly.
Right.
That's how toxic South Asian family households are made.
It's literally, and that's what I mean. I'm like, these spaces have actually turned into the next generation of like weddings and family functions that carry the same issues. But now it's been done in a more trendy, palatable way. It's like I made like a comment where I was like, there's a lot of these South Asian kids that think that just because they drink and go to parties and go to these like raves and whatever, that automatically separates from their problematic elders. I'm like, you know, you wearing your fucking, you know, puttu or bindi with like sneakers or something, like, or whatever, or like that doesn't make you progressive. No. You're just dressed differently, but the same ignorance still exists within the community.
And that's not to say that you can't dress that way and be progressive, but it's the
correlating
and the
that
observations.
I think people need to stop also correlating wokeness to an image, or being socially aware to an image. You can go. I'm like, sorry, you can go and drink and you can do, you know, all of that. But if you're still having a problematic mentality, all of that doesn't mean anything. It's actually very, I don't know.
It's crazy because people will assume that I'm some like crazy raver because I always have things to say on my Instagram about, you know, social justice and like protecting the rights of all South Asians.
Also, I don't even know why that's like, you can be, you know, you can drink, you can do all these stuff. That doesn't mean that you're progressive.
And that doesn't mean that you're not lame. You know what I mean? Like, it's just interesting how like people just correlate like one particular identity with like being woke, and then one particular identity with like being ignorant. But there are so many things that you can mix and match with each. You know? And it's only by having those conversations that you can actually be, as you would call it, woke. Not that there's an issue with being woke. And an interesting other thing that I think I want to like touch upon before we like get towards, you know, like the future and move towards talking about the future is we spoke about like the angry black woman trope. And do you know what's really intriguing? Like people who are dark skinned, right? Stereotypically, they're made out to be aggressive, this and that. But
the proximity, I guess, because of like the anti-blackness that exists within the world.
There we go.
The world,
the whole ass
because
world.
literally every single community is anti-black, and so if within the individual communities, if you carry a proximity to blackness, there's the me speaking up about it. I have been labeled by Punjabis and North Indians for talking about the issues that I do. In the way that I do it, I'm seen as aggressive and angry. And
it's interesting because you're the one who feels intimidated.
Yeah, and it's right? And it's crazy, because they're like, you're the aggressor. It's like, no, I'm not. I'm just making a statement. I'm just doing something. I'm not hurting anyone by making this statement. And I'm led to have like really aggressive backlash from the communities that I'm addressing.
I think people sort of, in general, whatever identity you are, you need to be aware of like how just your presence may be intimidating to somebody, or just the way that you're brought up, or just the way that you move may be intimidating.
It's definitely those undertones of anti-blackness exist, because like I said, in that space, when I hold when they hold, I guess, proximity to whiteness in that space, and I hold the proximity to blackness in that space, the way that they're also treating me in that space, it's like, like I said, those undertones of, if I'm being treated as this, as someone that is a non-black brown person, imagine how a black person would be treated in that space.
Yeah, exactly. And it's
even worse in that
and it's
space.
Those people who sort of, as I said, talk about brown joy as well.
And even that's been taken from, black movements, right? So they've co-opted something that black people created to, celebrate black joy, and then
I mean, it's easy, isn't it, though, to talk about brown joy when you feel seen, but the only reason you feel seen is because of your proximity to whiteness. It's easy for people to have those conversations and talk about the joy of being brown and how they feel like, oh, finally they're moving ahead in the world, when they are being seen because it's easy to be seen.
I think that with the whole like a lot of these things with South Asian representation and stuff that I've read, again, there's this, I feel uncomfortable reading a lot of them, because I think there's this moment where a lot of them had this "what about me" mentality.
What do you mean by that?
Like I said, like even when I was in a lot of the things that I've been part of, and then when I was in Brown Skin Girl, I was
I don't want to bring it up. So I can't believe it.
When I was in Brown Skin Girl, it was the most iconic and like emotional moment for me. But I was, it's also like, we have to also remember a lot of the dark skin representation that we're seeing right now in terms of like Tamil people even being seen, that's being given by black people. So whilst like I was picked by a black woman to be in that music video, right? And yet when the video got released, South Asians were trying to claim like this was like their hard work. It's like, no, all of these South Asian film industries would never ever pick someone that looked like me. And it was a black woman that casted me. Same with Bridgerton. It was a black woman that casted these Tamil actresses, right? So whilst a lot of South Asians, and including Tamil people, can like, be like, oh yeah, like, this person's on screen. But it's black people doing the job. Again, black women specifically doing the job that South Asians are not doing. It's also like they're trying to claim work that they never did, and then expecting a community that's further marginalized them to be doing the work. So when the video came out for Brown Skin Girl, I was like, there's so many things I'm going to address. First of all, I'm going to address everybody, including Tamil folks, about anti-blackness in the communities. And secondly, and then I'm going to talk about anti-Tamilness within these North Indian and Punjabi communities. But addressing the anti-blackness was amongst all South Asians being like, remember, it's not a right for me to be in this video, a privilege for me to be in this video. Because I will always say to people, this is a beautiful Afrocentric black song about black women. The fact that we were featured, I mean, like a dark skinned brown person or a Tamil person was featured in it, that was a blessing for me, but there is in no way that I felt entitled to that space. But seeing the comments from South Asians have this, oh, finally, a brown, a South Asian person being highlighted, blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, no, I don't. There was like undertones of anti-blackness. And I'm like, look, I'm in a video.
Yeah.
I'm being picked by a black person to be in this video. And this video is about black beauty and black women specifically. Me being featured, yes, it's amazing, but like I said, it's a privilege and a blessing. And what I can do in this time is consistently, remind non-black POC communities of how much the black communities have done for not just black representation, but for non-black people of color in terms of their representation.
It's just, it intrigues me that like the same people who would, and I've grown up in so many situations where obviously I'm lighter skinned, and people will talk about how it's good that I'm white, or don't stay out in the sun, you'll get dark. Don't turmeric masks, bleaching stuff. I know that you recently did obviously the BBC iPlayer documentary with Tam France as well.
It was a panel
discussion
to support the documentary.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you spoke about like stuff like that, and how that has been something that I've lived with throughout my entire life, this fear of getting darker. But when you're on a Beyonce music video, people are like, she is beating the system. It's like the system that you created. Well, not necessarily you, the system that colonialism created, but a system that still maintains because of the attitudes that we still have today about blackness and anti-blackness.
And they just saw that as a moment for them. I'm like, this isn't a moment. Like, no. I'm like, no. I'm like, I think if anything, it's like we need to highlight that there is anti-blackness is so rife in the community, and the colorism stems from anti-blackness. And like I said,
anti-Tam sentiments
and that then also, like I said, like me addressing the anti-blackness within all South Asian communities, but then also then individually being like seeing the same communities of people that oppress me as a Tamil person. That's how I was like, okay, now I'm done with calling out everyone. I need to now focus on the North Asians and the Punjabis. We need to talk about anti-Tamilness.
It's like, tick, tick, who's left? Like, let's go through the list. Let's do it.
So, this is what I mean. I am able to critique my own community as well, whilst then also then like pointing out these things. So no one can come to me and be like, you're only just saying, no one can just be like, you're only just playing the victim and blah, blah. No, I'm not. Because I came for everyone.
We're leaving nothing, like, absolutely not. And I think this is the whole point of this podcast episode. It's not to have a go at anyone. It's to sort of say that you have to, brown girls, like, we need to fix up. We need to be critically thinking. We need to be thinking about who's not at the table. We have to be thinking about who's
South
at
Asians
the table.
in general need to ask that question, like as a whole, right? I think that everyone needs to ask, who's not being included? Why are they not being included? How can we include them? How can we platform them? And then constantly looking at like how, whilst even whilst I'm in a Tamil person in those spaces, dark skinned person, non-binary, queer, femme in that space, I'm also there being like, well, what privileges do I have? Why am I here? I'm constantly being like, I'm also, whilst I'm here, despite all the things that have held me back in the system, I'm also here because I might hold certain palatability to the way that I look. And how can I then use my platform as a way to highlight all the amazing people that I know that are talking that might not have access to the resources and spaces that I have. So it's always important to, be there, not gatekeeping. Because I think also gatekeeping comes from a place of insecurity and fear. Because and that's also to do with the fact that like
we'll be left behind if we pick up on them. We're going to be grouped in with them. We're going to be left behind. And
I think that's maybe why it is with when I address anti-Tamilness within like even with Punjabis and stuff. I think there is that fear of like some people like it up there, right? They don't want someone addressing what it is, because
some
does
people
that
like
mean
just being the only director who's a brown person, or the only I don't know, like just so many different occupations.
It's frustrating sometimes hearing them just talk about, like I said, like I'm always going to every platform talking about both my oppression and my privilege. But seeing a lot of, like I said, like those dominant communities who are like in the same industry as me, only talk about their oppressions. Like, you know, right now it's so trendy to talk about being
Oppressed,
brown or South Asian, but they don't want to address, you know, these other things. And so hearing them go up there, when I know that, like I said, I've been to like parties where like there'd been predominantly actually Punjabi people in the space, and it's, you know, and they're like these like light skin, upper caste, very bougie little Punjabi kids, and they're doing the best, right? And I'm so fucking frustrated because I'm like, I have to be fucking exceptional to come into this space as a dark skinned Tamil person, and I have to, you know, be the fucking moment. Because if I chose to come in looking half as basic as some of them, I wouldn't even get half. I wouldn't even be acknowledging. Like, being in these spaces sometimes, I'm like, I always say mediocrity is a privilege that I do not have.
Yes. Okay.
At all. I don't know who said that, but I heard, and I was like, that is it. In those spaces, seeing the way that some of them can, you know, do the same thing that white people, you know, doing the bare minimum that white people can. It's like, I'm not taking away their struggles, because yes, in white spaces they have faced whatever racism, whatever.
But as you said, there are different.
Going into those spaces, knowing that they can literally say some basic ass line and be like, end racism now, being brown is like blah blah. And everyone's like, oh my god, yay! Oh my god, yay! They said something so like monumental. Like, they're doing so much for the community. I'm like, are they?
Yeah.
Are they? Completely. Is that white passing?
This is what I mean. There are so many different degrees of like an identity that a person might have. And like I said, I can go into those spaces and I would probably exist as easily as they would in those spaces in comparison to you. But if I went to a white space, it would be different to me. But that's it. It's about acknowledging where we come
putting us then even in that white space, then that becomes a thing of like, wait, who holds more proximity? And it's just, this is what I mean. It's just complicated. It's complex, but I don't think it's hard to understand.
So we've had a massive bitch sesh. You know, I feel my soul feels like cleansed.
Was it really a bitch? She was just like addressing truth.
Oh no, absolutely. You know? Is it bitching if you're just
if I'm just being fact?
If you're just being
the bitching just happens after the filming. That's
what can I say? I don't think anyone want to be. I think loads of people want to be a fly on the wall for what we were about to say at lunch. But you know, we'll keep it PG. You don't want to get death threats sent to your message requests. Absolutely not. But the question that I want to ask you now is: let's look ahead to the future. Okay, so you talked about spaces that don't just serve the people who I guess would be the upper echelons of South Asian society, but serve everyone. What does that look like, and how do we get there? What do you think?
Checking your fragility for one. That's what I think everyone can learn that. Everybody. That's just a general thing. Everyone needs to check their fragility.
In what way?
Just like, you know, if your privilege is being addressed, you need to also understand, like, why am I feeling upset with my privilege being addressed? Why am I being fragile about it? And also understand that fragility is actually, I think, learned white behavior. It's behavior that you've like, it's white, it's behavior that your oppressors will, you know, show you. So why are you presenting that same attitude to people who are addressing, you know, the oppression that they face from your communities? But I think, like I said, handing over the mic to the further marginalized communities and seeing how we can learn from each other. Like, I want South Asian spaces and platforms to be open to talking about individual communities. I would love to learn more about so many different communities. And, you know, there's, you know, whilst, you know, Punjabis and North Indian communities have, you know, been dominant, there's still probably stuff that I don't know about, you know, their communities that I probably want to learn. But I want them to also be the problem is that I feel like our communities have been open to learning more, whilst they haven't been open to learning about our communities. And then when it has been addressed, it's been overlooked. And, you know, even at events like if Tamil music is played or something, what is the reception that I know that a lot of the dominant communities are going to be like, well, it's not Bhangra, but open your fucking eyes. There's so much more music to be listened to.
So much more music, so much more food.
Cultures, foods.
Dances, you know.
I just think really just come with an open mind. While still being aware of your privilege and your oppression, and going into that space, making sure that you're also not going to like cause harm on people and like don't play fucking devil's advocate as well.
That's the thing. It's
do your research.
That is
follow the right people. Follow me because I can help people, the right people. But like, you know, obviously, like I'm talking from like a personal perspective. I'm not an academic.
No, of course.
You know, but there's so many people out there that are doing from my community who are talking about a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about, and talking about it in a more like academic perspective.
Yeah.
And I think it's just going out your way to like really listen to people and seeing how we can help the communities rather than homogenizing us the way that white people have homogenized all of us.
So the name of the game is literally just an open dialogue.
Yeah, and don't be a dick.
Yeah, don't be a dick. That too. And I think it's just really important to sort of address that, like, when we're talking about open dialogue, that's me also acknowledging that, do you know what? I talk about racism a lot on my Instagram, and I'm an activist obviously for women of colour and South Asian women of colour, but it's also about me acknowledging that me and a black woman, we are not the same. Me and somebody who has a northern accent, maybe, we are not the same. Me and somebody who's lighter than me, we are not the same. Like, yes, exactly.
Of identity.
Exactly.
But I think generally it's also just like giving like communities like like mine also the autonomy to also be able to, like, if you've given us, I mean, if we've been given the platform by these dominant communities that are privileged in a lot of these spaces, let us curate those spaces and let us decide what kind of even, like I said, imagine just having a space that's gonna like also individually highlight these communities. Be like, okay, have an event that is gonna have probably like Tamil DJs playing like mixture like Tamil music and Tamil food, and and this goes for like other communities that exist. Why don't we just do that and like turn that, turn things like, in my head I can imagine these like, imagine like a family function but having all these different communities come in, but we highlight individually like, oh, these are different foods that exist now, and having like performers in these.
You got the cogs working in my brain now. I'm like event.
I'm
event.
Like,
did
this
somebody
is my
say
event? So if anybody tries to steal it now,
copyrighted.
Yeah, it's copyrighted.
It's on.
But I can imagine this event taking place, and like we allow the space to like show these different communities that exist.
Yeah.
Instead of having a panel, having boards of people that are curating these events that are really diverse. And not just, like we said, there's a lot of them end up having always the dominant communities speaking for the rest of us when they don't really understand our experiences in that way.
I feel like upholding each other is also upholding yourself.
Yeah.
And in the long run, it'll just end up being healthier for all of us.
We always have to make sure that we're going to fight for those further marginalized. I'm always, whilst I'm facing my oppression, I'm also turning around thinking who's suffering more than me. If we can bring them first. If you can always help the further marginalized, everyone gets their rights.
Okay.
That's how I think it works.
Cool. I think we're done. Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Of course.